You know, the Bible says God created us for relationships. And when God put Adam in the Garden of Eden, I mean, the guy had everything he could ever want. But God looked at Adam and he said, "It's not good for a man to be alone." I don't know if you ever put that together, but when God created the world, the very first thing he said about all creation that was not good was this idea of us being lonely. Last week we started a brand new series on the seasons of life. We just laid down some general principles. I hope you'll look at it online. Today we're going to be more specific and we're going to look at the season of loneliness. Now I know some of you are thinking, well, I'm not lonely. I don't need this sermon. Well, congratulations. I'm glad you don't. But you should pay attention because sooner or later you will need a sermon on loneliness. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, and everything we talk about today will come from that text, we hear the last words of the Apostle Paul. He's in prison. He is about to be executed by Nero, the Roman Caesar. All his friends have left him, and he is definitely struggling with loneliness. However, from this passage, there's four causes of loneliness we're going to see. And it's really great because there are four cures, things that Paul himself did to get past some of the things he were dealing with. So what are the causes of loneliness? I'm going to just give you four that is in our text. Number one is transitions. Life is a series of change. Life is a series of transition. Some people call them passages of life. We're calling them seasons of life. But I want you to understand any major change can bring on loneliness. And you say, well, why? When you have a major change, whether it's a good change or a bad change, you're getting something new, but you're also giving up something old. You're giving up on something else. There's a loss. There's a letting go with every change you face in life. And that loss can bring about loneliness. Any kind of new experience can make you lonely. Remember your first day at school? How about the first day at college? Or maybe the first day on your new job, or did you ever get fired from a job? How lonely that felt. Or have you maybe retired and walked out to never go back into that building? Any kind of experience can bring loneliness. Now with Paul, it's very simple to understand. He's at the end of his life. And I love what he says. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time has come for my departure. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. He obviously knows his time is short. He knows his days are numbered. He senses the end is near. And these are sad words for a man who's all alone. Now, he may be going through the final transition, final season of his life, but my point is this. Any change in your life can bring about a period of loneliness. Now, number two, I want you to look at the cause of separation. I mean, when we're separated from the people we love, maybe it's a job, an illness, or travel, whatever, you get lonely. Paul writes to Timothy in this letter. That's why it's called Timothy. And twice he says, why don't you come see me? There in verse 9 he says, do your best to come quickly. And then in 21 he says, do your best to get here before winter. And in this passage, Paul will list 7 of his closest friends that he misses. He says, Demas has deserted. Crescens has gone to Galatia. Titus has gone to Dalmatia. Mark is gone. Tychicus is in Ephesus. Erastus stayed in Corinth. And I left Trophimus sick in Miletus. In other words, he's all alone. They were his traveling buddies. I mean, Paul's a people person. He loved to be around a lot of people. But now, at the end of his life, he's in a prison in a foreign country, and nobody's there, and none of his friends are there, and he misses everybody because of separation. In 1989, I went to the Philippines with a group of pastors. And as part of that trip, I went by myself to the island of Samar, which is incredibly scary for a story I'll tell you about some other time. But then I had to fly back to Manila by myself. Now, at that time, Manila was the highest urban population in the world, 22 million people in the city. I landed at the airport and I realized I have no clue where the rest of these pastors are. At that time, I was the loneliest man in all of the Philippines because separation will do that. And notice it says, do your best to come quickly. When you say, why? Because Paul is, well, he's not stupid. He knows he's not going to be around that much longer. I think it's a good way to remind us all that who do you need to make that phone call to? Who have you been putting off writing that letter to, thinking, oh, they'll be around for another couple years? Listen, nobody's guaranteed anything in life. So I just urge you to do good while you can. Now, the third cause of loneliness is just opposition. Listen to this. Alexander the metalworker did me a great deal of harm. The Lord will repay him for what he's done. And you too should be on your guard against him because he has strongly opposed our message. Opposition. Yeah, it can cause loneliness too. Now, I don't know exactly what Alexander's problem was. I have a theory, and a lot of people, I get it from them. He's a metal worker, so he's probably making these idols for the people in the town. But whatever it is, it's pretty serious because Paul says God's going to pay him back. Maybe he's slandering Paul. You definitely know he's hurting the church. And that makes Paul's loneliness all that more pronounced. You remember on the playground when you were little? Kids would always gang up on the weakest one. They would say incredibly mean things. They would say hurtful things. And I'm sure that person felt very alone. Now, some of you might have been that person, and you're still feeling the results of those words. Some of you might have been the bully, okay? Be honest here. And it's still affecting you as well. They say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt. That's one of the biggest lies out there. Listen, a broken bone will heal in a couple of weeks. But words often take years to heal. And when we're opposed by other people, we just build up the walls. We put ourselves in a shell and we say, they are not going to hurt me again. I'm never going to let anybody hurt me again like that. And we're the ones who pay with loneliness. And then there's always the fourth reason, rejection. Demas, because he loved the world, has deserted me. He just gave up. And he says, at my first offense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. You know, that might be the biggest cause of loneliness on the planet. When you feel you've been betrayed by someone close to you or abandoned by the people you really thought you could count on, you know, a friend, family member, spouse, boss, I mean, you've invested your life in them and now they're out the door. Now, I don't know, some of you might be dealing with this even today. People you thought were going to be loyal ended up betraying you. People you thought you could count on let you down. Maybe even a friend or a spouse walked out on you. I'm going to say God understands and God senses that pain because we're all designed by God to be in relationships. That's the way it's supposed to work. And one of the most devastating things you can ever do to another human being is to reject. That is so painful that we try all sorts of ways to get it off of us. We work ourselves to death. We buy stuff we don't need, thinking that's going to make us happy. And some people try alcohol or drugs or sexual escapades, anything to compensate and just dull the pain of loneliness. And you know, it doesn't work. It typically leads into depression, kind of this downward spiral when we build walls around us and we don't let anyone in to us. Now, what do you do if you're dealing with loneliness? And we're lucky because we see some things in Paul's life that I think apply to us directly. Number one, he learned to utilize his time. And I'm saying don't waste your time in periods of loneliness. Make the best of a bad situation. Resist the temptation to just not do anything. Take some action, any kind of action. You know, if life gives you a lemon, make lemonade. That is not a cliche, and it's not actually such bad advice. Try to be creative about what you can do when things are not going so well. Paul says this is his plan. To Timothy, he says, bring the cloak I left with Carpus, and bring my books, especially the parchment. Parchment is kind of we call it notebook paper, but it's far more expensive. A single sheet of parchment was a day's salary. That's what notebook paper cost back then. Paul says, bring my books and some writing paper and bring my cloak. I'm going to be alone, so I just as well be comfortable and I'm just as well get something done. You don't see him throwing a pity party. You don't see him complaining because conditions are so bad and all his friends are gone. He says, I'm in a pickle, but I'm going to make the best of it. He says, Timothy, bring my coat. I'm going to be here. I just as well get warm because Roman jail cells were notorious for being dark, damp, and cold. And by the way, we learn something there too, because when we go through periods of loneliness, or bitterness, or depression, we actually don't take very good care of ourselves. We let ourselves go down physically, mentally. I mean, we don't rest well, forget any kind of exercise or eating right. And so maybe some of you need to hear this today. You need to take care of yourself a little bit more when you get down, a little lonely. And then Paul says, bring my books. He's going to have time to study. Now, Paul was a people person, but Paul was a scholar. And you have to know that he wrote some of the best theology that you and I could ever read. He wrote letters to the churches he started, and God put all those letters together in a book that we call the New Testament. And 2,000 years, here we are, listening to Paul's advice and actually benefiting from his loneliness. I don't know if you ever put this together, but if he hadn't been in a slammer, do you think he would have just taken the time to write all those letters? No, probably not, because Paul was out there. He was working. And the only way God could slow him down enough was to put him in jail. That's a scary thought. I hope that doesn't happen much these days. But I want you to understand how much we benefit today because Paul took the time when in a period of loneliness, he wrote letters to churches that now are part of our Bible. Now, the second cure, Paul did not freak out over his hurt. He minimized his hurt. Paul says, at my first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. May it not be held against them. Now, this is not just those 7 closest friends he writes about. He's in a city of Rome with hundreds of thousands of Christians, but none of them decide to come when he's taken before the court the first time. They're afraid of their lives, of course. And honestly, if I'd have been there, I would have said, you jerks, where were you? I've done so much for you, and they couldn't even come out and put in a good word for me. But I have to believe Paul was not like me. I have to believe he was genuine here when he said, let us not hold it against him. Now, when you are hurt, don't reach out and start blaming somebody. That's not helpful, and that's just going to make your hurt and loneliness even more. Don't rehearse it over and over in your mind, because it's just going to get bigger and bigger and out of control. I mean, refuse to be resentful, because bitterness will eat you alive. And when you are hurt, when you've been lonely, play it down and pray it up. Now, I want you to know bitterness and loneliness kind of go together. Because when you become lonely, you start eventually having a pity party about something. Pity parties always make you bitter about something. And the more bitter you become, the more lonely you become. And pretty soon you become a hard-hearted, depressed, bitter person that nobody can get close to, let alone want to get close to. That's why when you go through a period of loneliness, you have to just keep it to yourself, bring it in, minimize it as much as you can. Number 3, kind of a quick one here, just recognize God's presence with you. When you're lonely, God is with you. He's always been there right beside you. Even when you don't feel it, God is there. He's always been with you. You are never alone, regardless of what season of life you're in. I'm just recommending that in whatever season of life that you find yourself, look for God's presence in a stronger way. Amy Grant sang a song that says, I love a lonely day because it makes me think about you, meaning God. Prayer is a fantastic way to get through loneliness, because you can talk to God anytime, anywhere. And again, I remind you, He understands what we feel. But the 4th one, and maybe the big one today, emphasize the needs of others when you go through these lonely times. Don't focus inward, focus outward. Find a ministry. Ministry is a fancy church word for you simply finding a place where you can use your talents and gifts to help others. The loneliest person in the world is a person whose life consists only of themselves. Selfish, self-centered people will always be plagued by loneliness. God, on the other hand, has wired us to want to help others. It is just natural instinct within a healthy person to help others. And if we want to break out of a loneliness or other seasons of life that we're not particularly fond of, we have to stop saying, I don't have any friends, and start becoming a friend. A lot of loneliness is the fear to be open, honest, genuine, transparent with others. We are afraid many times to let people know who we are because we're afraid they are going to hurt us like someone else has hurt us. And when we're afraid of reaching out to someone else, we're guaranteeing a life of loneliness. Paul says, "But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength, that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it." Paul's simply saying in this last chapter of Timothy that I might be lonely today. I look forward to the time when I don't have to worry about that, but right now I'm going to keep blessing other people. And that's kind of the key altogether. Overcoming loneliness is to stop building walls and start building bridges. Stop building the walls between you and others and start building bridges to those same folks. Loneliness is really homesickness from God or for God. You probably just never thought of it that way before. All of us were made to have a very personal, intimate relationship with God, and nothing's ever going to take that place because it's part of who we are. It's part of how God has made us. So my final advice this morning is open up your lives to Jesus. If you've never heard the good news about salvation and being born again, I hope you understand it's not about rules and regulations and rituals, but it's about a relationship, and we're more than happy to talk to you about that. And we also encourage you to be an active part of a church family who will love you and accept you unconditionally. None of us were meant to be Lone Ranger Christians. So find a family, become part of that family. I think the reason so many Christians are lonely is because they're sitting when they should be serving. All around us is a world full of lonely people, just waiting to be cared for, just waiting for a friendly hug or a encouraging note. And rather than saying, I don't have any friends, it might be better for us just to become a friend to some of the folks that are around us. I encourage you to stand with us